we've been
This meeting is being recorded.
we've been in MRU for a little more than 20 years. Shu Chen began this MRU, and we've every year, except for one during COVID, have had our summer UC system-wide bioengineering symposium. But now we've sort of expanded our activities, and about 3 years ago now, when we renewed this MRU, they asked us to the charge was to expand, that the BIC leadership expand the activities of this MRU to be more inclusive of the depth and breadth of bioengineering, talent and activities throughout California, which is what motivated us to put together this California Academy, which there's many of you might have heard about, and but also engage in these types of activities, including this industry panel. So this is going to provide a forum for California bioengineers, especially undergraduates and master's students who we're going to engage with today, to get a sense of the depth and types of industry and what the industry is really expecting from y'all as a workforce. So this is going to be go forward as introducing this panel that you can see all the members of. After that, Song Lee will give a brief survey of the industry, the bioengineering, medtech, and pharma industry that was completed about a year ago. And then we'll proceed with this panel discussion that'll be hosted by Walt Baxter. We have undergrads and MS grads from throughout the University of California. And so without further ado, I think I can hand it over to Walt, and he'll introduce the panel. Thanks, Walt.
Thanks, Dr. Simon. Sorry, muted myself, rookie move. Welcome everybody. We're really excited to have you today. And as you can see, we've got this really stellar lineup of individuals who volunteered their time to come speak to University of California undergraduates and master's students. So I think without further ado, we're going to step right into introductions. And so I think our first introducer, our first panelist would be Dr. Linda Narhi. So Linda, please take it away.
Alrighty, so this is my little slide to kind of introduce my career path. And I've been told it helps if you kind of mention what really got you excited about science in the first place. So in my case, I moved from a very small rural town in Michigan to Ann Arbor, where University of Michigan is, when I was in first grade. And that was awesome because we did a lot of hands-on science in class. And so I realized when I was around 8 or 9 that I really liked chemistry, and especially the chemistry that made living things live. I got really interested in that. You can't tell from this picture, but when I was younger, my hair was bright orange. So throughout my career, I've been usually one of the few, if not the only women in the room, and also one of the few, if not the only redheads in the room. So I also learned very young that you can't hide, for better or worse. So after high school, where I did a bunch of different things, then I did go to Michigan. I didn't live at home. And I got my BS in chemistry there, and also cell and molecular biology. Met my husband. And so we got married the same week I graduated, and our honeymoon was driving out to California because he was at Caltech finishing up his master's at that point. I told him I would hate California. That was not true at all. I only applied to UCs actually for graduate school, and then went to UCLA, as you can see here. So in my case, literally, I came to Southern California on my honeymoon and never left. So at UCLA, I got my PhD in biological chemistry. And by then I realized that a lot of the interesting chemistry that happened in the body was proteins. And so I actually did my thesis working on the induction, purification, and characterization of a cytochrome P450 system. At the time, molecular biology was super popular, and I was one of the few students who was actually working on proteins. It ended up that was quite fortuitous, because when I finished my degree and finished postdocing at UCLA, I decided that rather than pursue a traditional academic career, I would try biotech, which was very new at the time. And Amgen was recruiting for protein chemists. So I joined Amgen in 1986. Biotech was really young at that point. We didn't know if you could actually make proteins into drugs. So I was in the R&D because that's what the whole company was. Started out doing purification and characterization, and the little logo down here is the original logo, which is not the logo they use anymore. But typical, I think, of people whose careers have been spent mostly in industry, I didn't stay in one department and I didn't stay working on just one thing. And so I've actually been in most of the departments at Amgen that have a science base, spent most of my career in the process development organization, which at Amgen is the group that goes from selecting the final drug candidate and doing the process work, analytical work, formulation and device development up through phase 3s. So it's really a bridging organization that lets you learn a whole lot. I have the little family there because during the time I had 2 kids, I actually have a son and a daughter who are older than you guys. And Amgen, like many, especially the biotech companies, has kind of a bifurcated career path. And so I chose eventually after I led various analytical groups. I started the particle group. I co-led the protein engineering group for a while. I co-led our manufacturability assessment. And I had up to like 50 people reporting to me, but decided I really preferred the science pathway. So the last part of my career, I spent as a scientific executive director. And during my whole career, I've really been interested in educational outreach and interacting with other industry peers to try and move kind of the science forward when we can. And so I ended up having this be my main job. I got to lead the internal and external tech dev and start and lead the postdoc program in process development. Many companies actually have postdoc programs, which are pretty interesting if you're not sure where you want to go. I retired a couple years ago and started consulting primarily for Genentech, though that's ending soon, a couple of small companies. I'm still working with several of the larger groups like the USP. And then for the past 8 years, I've been an adjunct professor at UCSB, but the past 2 years, I've actually been developing curriculum and teaching there. So trying to apply the skills I learned in industry.
Thank you, Linda. That was phenomenal. Quite a journey. And I think now we'll turn to our next panelist, Don Chigazola. Don, take it away.
Thanks, Walt. My journey has been one of a path through many different industries that finally ended landing me in medical device. But I graduated from UC Davis 1978, about the same time as Linda graduated from college as well, with a bachelor's in biological science. And probably like many people, had no idea what I wanted to do. What I knew was that I needed to find my first job and start earning some money. And so I found a pharmaceutical company in Los Angeles that would hire me as a chemist, and spent about 2 years as a chemist in the pharma industry. Didn't really care for Los Angeles very much at the time. I'm a Northern California guy. So at the first opportunity, switched industries and moved to aerospace up in the Sacramento area, and ended up spending probably 20 years in the environmental health and safety, industrial hygiene, occupational toxicology field, assessing chemical and physical hazards to workers in hazardous work environments. And during that time, I knew at some point I wanted to get into management and not be an individual contributor my whole career. So went back to school at night, got a master's in systems management from USC. And after about 5 years in aerospace, had an offer from the electric utility industry, PG&E, to manage their environmental health and safety programs for their geothermal industry. And so moved over to Sonoma County and worked in geothermal for about 5 years, and then eventually into steam generation. That industry went through a whole bunch of perturbations and changes, and I was fortunate to be approached and offered a job by Hewlett Packard with a local semiconductor site. And so moved into semiconductor, initially doing environmental health and safety. And that was a fabulous experience. I got to join Hewlett Packard when Bill and Dave were still alive, and really got a good sense of what it meant to the HP way was, and learned how individuals could put a a fingerprint on a culture. And that's what Hewlett and Packard did. Learned tremendous amount of leadership skills from them. They ended up after their passing, HP split, and the tech and semiconductor went to a company called Agilent Technologies. And then in 2001, this company called Medtronic approached me, and they were developing their first drug-eluting stent, and they got into a whole bunch of trouble with active pharmaceutical ingredients and potent compounds, and asked me to join them to develop their potent compound safety program so that they can continue the research on drug-eluting stents. I said, well, I'm really interested in manufacturing. And they said, well, if you could fix these problems for us, we'll make those opportunities available to you. So I went ahead and left a great company and joined Medtronic, and absolutely loved what I did. And within about a year, they asked me to take on manufacturing responsibilities, first for coronary stents and then for endovascular stent grafts. And within about a year and a half, they asked me to run the entire manufacturing operation. So I spent 12 years with Medtronic in their coronary and endovascular businesses, managing an organization of about 600 people, supporting a revenue stream of about $1 billion. And absolutely loved it, fell in love with medical device, and just had so many great experiences interfacing with our patients who had our implantable devices in them. During this time, I got a call from at the time was I think an assistant chair of a program called Biomedical Engineering at UC Davis, who asked me to come over and give a guest lecture to their seniors on the medical device industry. And so in about 2010, I did that and went over and Dr. Angie asked me to give this lecture, and told them about the product development lifecycle for medical device products and how you get a medical device to market. And I guess the feedback was good enough because Dr. Simon Cherry and Angie asked me to turn it into a quarter-long class, which I did. And I've been teaching this class now for 10 years at Davis on the entire medical device product development lifecycle. So I've retired from Medtronic, but I still found a new passion in teaching and absolutely love sharing my experience with undergraduates at Davis. That's my story.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, thank you. Quite a story. These are amazing. I'll let our next panelist, Greg Foster, take over. Greg, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Foster. I'm a bioengineer. And my journey in bioengineering began really early with my first Lego set that my parents got me when I was 2 years old. And then in high school, I was part of the CAD automated drafting program where we do these 3D drawings, and actually won a couple of competitions and got really interested in computers, but still liked science a lot. So I applied to UC Davis Biomedical Engineering program and started there as an undergraduate and graduated in 2010. And you can see in that image, that's our senior design capstone project. And clearly we're wearing the appropriate PPE in one of the labs in the GBSF building. We've been working all night, but we were successful, and our project actually won an award. Really liked Davis, and after graduating and not really being that excited about a recession, decided to stay and get my PhD and joined Scott's lab, where I did a ton of experiments on using microfluidic devices and learning how to critically think and write well and communicate well. Graduated in 2015 with my PhD in biomedical engineering, and then did a brief postdoc at Georgia Tech in Andres Garcia's lab, where I did more microfluidics, but instead of with cells, more with hydrogels. Got tired of being a poor postdoc, and so applied and missed California. And so applied for a position at Thermo Fisher Scientific, since I was aware of, I had used a lot of the equipment during my graduate work, and started working on this automated sample prep instrument for doing mass spectrometry and proteomics, and that just launched today. So that's on market now, which we're really excited about. I did all the technical lead and system integration for that. And then in 2020, I transferred to the genetic sciences division, where I now lead the system integration team for the genetic analyzers that we developed. And we just launched this one in the bottom right, the Seq Studio Flex, which is the capillary electrophoresis instrument, the original technology that was used to sequence the whole human genome. So I work with that team that's been there for 25, 30 years. That was part of that whole project with Craig Venter and Solera back in the late 90s, if those of you that are older and that remember the whole human genome race, right? And so now we're working on the next generation of that technology. And in the last year, I've gotten married and to someone I met in Scott's lab, and adopted a couple of huskies too. So that's my journey as a bioengineer. I love to hire bioengineers. I lead the system integration effort. I think bioengineers are perfect for system integration. Like the old saying goes, jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. That is very, very appropriate for system integration. They're the best fit. Thank you.
And I would just add, that's what you call productivity, that last image of marrying my lab manager. Happened a couple of times now. I try and keep them apart now in my lab.
Yeah, it's now a policy. Yeah. Thank you, Greg, for driving good policies in Scott's lab.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. And so next on our docket of esteemed panelists is Dr. Ann Lee Carlin. Ann.
Thank you, Walt. Happy to be here. I'm enjoying everyone else's journey line, so happy to share mine. I was born in New Orleans and grew up there. Can you tell? I have a Southern accent just as strong as Walt's, so that's my background. My father was an engineering professor, eventually became dean of engineering, actually at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which is part of the reason why I might have fallen into the whole engineering path and love it. When I was in high school, was very interested in biology and technology, and ended up at UC Berkeley, and had a wonderful time, really, frankly, sampling probably all aspects of engineering, and really having a chance actually to have two out of many, but memorable experiences. One of them was a summer internship at JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, converting interplanetary software into applications, imaging applications for biomedical engineering. That was great. And then also the summer after I graduated, went to University of Geneva to also do some software work for imaging as well. And so really wanted to pursue a little deeper training in bioengineering, and went to one of my favorite places, UC San Diego, where I met my good friend, not only Walt, but also Dr. Song Lee as well, and had a memorable experience there, and really thinking about bioengineering more, I would say, at the cellular molecular level, which has served me well. It's just such an exciting area. Did a postdoc at the University College London, UK, before deciding finally whether to go academia. Maybe many of you out there might be thinking of different paths, but either go academia or industry. By the way, the door goes back and forth too. I don't think it's ever closed behind you. But I did decide that as an engineer, really drawn to the idea of making products or solutions, or contributing to solutions that really could help patients. And so joined a biotech in La Jolla, Advanced Tissue Sciences, in the early days, probably one of many cycles of tissue engineering and regeneration, still an area of fascination for me. While I was there, it was the first time I really had a chance to work on cross-functional teams and really, be asked to present to advisory boards and boards of directors, and really kind of fascinated by how companies get built and how teams are led, and just, sort of strategic decisions in general. So I took a sideways turn into, decided to go to business school. So I went to Stanford, got an MBA, and really, try to find a place where both science and business might matter. Did a very brief stint at Eli Lilly. It was very interesting, at the venture group, which was really, found myself on a project thinking about how to accelerate early development. But under some very positive and all kinds of different circumstances, found myself at Genentech, where I spent over 18 years. In fact, I just left about a year ago, I'd seen next week, actually. Spent 18 plus years at Genentech, fantastic company, and really, learned about biology, drug development, had a chance to lead a number of teams, including Rituxan, getting FDA approval, launching in immunology, led a team that developed some really groundbreaking, FDA awarded breakthrough therapy designations for antibody medicines in multiple sclerosis. And also eventually led a team of teams, as it were, to really, at any given year, about 40 projects in the clinical pipeline in many, many aspects, from oncology to neurology to immunology, with many, many different areas of science. In the sort of last few years when I was at Genentech, we and many of us in this, I'm sure, webinar have thought about what might be the future of medicine, what might be the future of healthcare, 10 years out, 20 years out. And for a number of us, we really thought of it in multiple ways. And again, this is one of many, many futures. But one area that I've personally been interested in, and again, I would say areas of Genentech, is really thinking about predict and prevent. If we could actually predict and prevent disease, that's where most people want to be, is to not have the disease at all. But if any of us do become ill, then where would we want to be, which is to restore health or possibly even cure. So this idea of, there've been so many advances in cell biology and technology and engineering that this idea of restoration of health is quite real. And so that was what I was thinking when Altos, where I currently am, knocked on the door and said, would you like to join us as Chief Operating Officer? And I said yes. And the briefest background there is that I'm not sure if you're aware of Dr. Shinya Yamanaka. In 2012, he won the Nobel Prize, showing that you can dial cells back to an earlier state. And with many, many scientists, not just him, but with he and others have shown that it might be possible to actually restore cellular health and actually even try to reverse disease. So that is the focus, the scientific focus and mission of Altos Labs. I've been very fortunate. I was employee number 2, so I can tell you what that looks like. Which looks like nothing. There's nothing when you're employee number 2 behind you. So over the past year, we've actually have built 3 global sites, one in the Bay Area, one in San Diego, one in Cambridge, UK. We've signed about 300 people and have invited about 25 tenured professors and their labs to come join us. So I'm on a rocket ship and a grand adventure and very excited because there's so many places where you can find bioengineers, wonderful bioengineers, and make a contribution, I would like to think and hope, to healthcare medicine. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anne. That's fantastic. We'll hand it over now to Kevin Francis. Take it away, Kevin.
Well, thanks, Walt. So yeah, I actually, bit of background of how I started my career. Actually, in 1982, when the Falklands War was on in the UK, I went to a British boarding school. And so I thought I had to join the military and defend my country. So I walked in and all I talked about was molecular biology because the first cloning had been done at that point in bacteria. And the guy just said to me, you should go away and come back. If you want to be an officer, then go get qualified first. So after doing my first degree, I then went into industry straight away, actually. I joined Wellcome before it was acquired by GlaxoSmithKline, and I was working on foot and mouth disease virus.
I can't connect to your Wi-Fi network.
Sorry, my Alexa's just gone off.
Instructions in the help section of your Alexa app.
So I started working on foot and mouth disease, and in fact, this picture here, which was on the front of Nature, I purified the virus for it. And this is why you need to get credit, because my name wasn't even in the acknowledgements for that paper. So even though I spent weeks and weeks and weeks purifying this and getting the crystallographic structure. So anyway, while I was at Wellcome, they sponsored me to go to Birkbeck College, University of London, to do my master's degree. And then I started doing my PhD at Surrey University, but it was just too difficult doing it on day release. So I quit and did full-time PhD at Edinburgh. And while I was there, I fell in love with using bioluminescence. And it's fascinating. If you ever sit in a dark room with a plate with bioluminescent bacteria, it's just fascinating. So I was making transcriptional constructs with bioluminescence. And from that point onwards, that's what I've done now for the last 30 plus years, is worked with bioluminescence. It was funny because I joined University of Nottingham as a postdoc, and about a year or 2 years after I joined, the contacts at Stanford University showed that you could take bioluminescent bacteria, put them into an animal, and then non-invasively monitor disease. And I remember my mentor then coming into the lab and basically calling us all idiots because we had had the instrumentation and the bacteria and the animals and never thought to put everything together. We discussed it, but we never thought it would work. And that's one of the things about doing science, is that you never say never until you try it. It's always worth trying it, no matter how dumb an idea may seem. You got to try it first. And that's a lovely thing about science. I love science because it fascinates me, and you can do all these really inventive things and come up with some wonderful solutions. So while I was working at, I then moved from University of Nottingham to Technical University of Munich, predominantly because I was had been offered a job to work in New Zealand, and I was going to emigrate to New Zealand. But while I was at the Technical University of Munich teaching, again, I was working on bioluminescence. I saw this advertisement in Science, magazine Science, for somebody that did biophotonic imaging for this startup company in California called Xenogen. And I put my CV in, and I faxed it because it was such a long, quite a long time ago. I faxed it off. And within about 10 minutes, I got a fax back saying that the founder of this company were flying to London to meet me. Could I fly to London? They sent me tickets, got on a plane, and 2 days later, I met them in London for dinner, and they basically just gave me the job there and then. So then 24 years ago, I came to the US, and I started this company called Xenogen, which was then acquired by Caliper, which was then acquired by PerkinElmer. So I was the 16th employee, the first scientist to be employed at Xenogen. And now I work for a company that's got 18,000 employees. So it's very, very different. I've also been very fortunate that because when PerkinElmer acquired Caliper, I was heading up the biology R&D at the company. But then it got closed down by PerkinElmer. So they allowed me then to take these visiting and adjunct professorships at these different universities. So I'm fortunate that I can now work in the UC system at UCLA in particular. And I work with a team of orthopedic surgeons on trying to figure out how I can resolve infection. And that's how I got in contact with Scott as well. So Scott and I work pretty closely on a lot of this work on implantation medical devices being infected by bacteria. So that sort of like brings it into a loop of how I became associated with this group. That's my story.
Thank you, Kevin. Fantastic. We'll pass it over to Jennifer Choi. Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. This has been so fascinating just listening to everyone's stories. So a little bit about myself. So I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York, so home of Niagara Falls. And at a pretty early age, I just sort of had this idea that I wanted to be a pediatrician when I grew up. And that was sort of my thing. And so I ended up going to Cornell initially as a biosci major with the intent of going to med school. But through a series of experiences, most notably getting to go and work at Biomed, so the first artificial heart company, as a 7-month co-op, sort of just opened my eyes to this idea of biomedical engineering. And so I went on to graduate with a biological and environmental engineering degree because we didn't have an undergraduate BME degree, but I was able to get a minor. From there, I quickly realized there was a lot more that I needed to learn. And so I went and did my master's at Syracuse, about an hour north of Ithaca, where I spent some time looking at the micromechanical effects of bone cements and hip implants. And while that was interesting, it was really this experience over at Rice University where I participated in this short course to introduce tissue engineering and regenerative medicine. And I just remember being completely blown away, never having heard of tissue engineering, and so knew I needed to continue on. So I went over and decided to pursue my PhD over at Tufts with Dr. David Kaplan, where I spent 4.5 years working with silkworm cocoons, specifically for adipose tissue engineering applications. I'd gotten married to my college sweetheart at that time. And at that point decided I wanted to work in industry and never go back to academia. So I went and pursued a postdoc at a group called Advanced Technologies in Regenerative Medicine. So they were located at the Ethicon site of Johnson & Johnson. So I did a 3-year postdoc there, had my first child there. And when I came back from maternity leave, our group dissolved. And so at that point, I had a young baby at home, not knowing what I wanted to do next, and decided to go and just try out teaching down the road at Rutgers. So I taught for a few years, and that was really where I realized I loved teaching and being with undergraduate students. It was something I never thought about before. I had my second child, and in my mind, I thought, if only there were a faculty position that was teaching focused, and had the ability to get tenure. And I just dreamt this, and lo and behold, within the next year or two, this position opened up at UC Davis, and we decided to move out west. My husband and I thought that Davis was located right by San Diego, so we clearly had no idea where Davis, California was. But nonetheless, we decided to move out here at the end of 2014, and so I'm now in a primarily teaching faculty role, where I sort of play a role in teaching engineering design across the curriculum through our intro, senior design courses, and a number of hands-on courses. So that's sort of where I'm at right now.
Thanks, Dr. Choi. Our final panelist is Dr. Steve George from UC Davis. So Dr. George, take it away. I will build your slide as you speak.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. Wow, this has been great. And I think it's pretty obvious to everyone out there that there is no single path into the field of biomedical engineering. And I continue to actually enjoy that probably more than anything about our field. It's really terrific to hear everyone's path. I use sort of a geography for mine. So Walt's going to sort of animate my way through it. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and I had a father who was an engineer who always wanted to go to med school. So I suffered from that. Gee, Steve, you should go to med school. But I also was really good at numbers and math, but I also really was good at writing. I almost went to the University of Puget Sound and went to an honors English program. It was kind of a coin flip. So that was my first lesson, and maybe to everyone out there, that you can be interested in many different fields and you can always pivot and change. I ended up going to Northwestern in Chicago and studying chemical engineering. I was a pre-med at the time. That made my dad very happy. I joined a lab, got really interested in research though. And at the same time, I met what became my wife. She was my RA in my dorm. And she was going to med school. So off we went. She's from St. Louis. And at the back of my mind, though, I was really thinking that what I wanted to do was get a PhD and do what I do now. So after med school, we decided to, she went to a residency program, and I went back to the University of Washington in Seattle and got a PhD again in chemical engineering. And that was the first of our sort of multi-body sort of problems that you have to constantly solve. And that'll be a theme through most of my career training. After Seattle, I sort of put my CV out to everywhere in the country. We had a map up. I think I applied to 60 different places, and I got an offer at UC Irvine. And just like Jen said, honestly, you guys, I had to go to the map and figure out where Irvine was. I wasn't quite sure, but was pretty excited about moving to California. Lots of things happened in Irvine for me. And although there were only one university, lots of opportunities. And one of them was starting a brand new biomedical engineering program down there. I was hired by chemical engineering down there. So we actually started a department. I was the founding chair down there, and we started a brand new bachelor's degree. So in terms of training programs and stuff, I've given it a ton of thought over many years at not only Irvine, but other universities I've been at. So maybe that will be useful on this panel. After 19 years, I got an offer to go back to St. Louis. So you see this sort of intersection in Missouri, largely because of our connections there. I have 31 in-laws in St. Louis. And that was a good experience for me primarily. My wife was not so happy professionally, and we started thinking about where we wanted to be longer term. And the answer kept coming back to be California. So we got an offer from Davis, and I moved back here in 2017. So I've been here for 5 years, and when we unpacked our boxes, we both looked at each other and said, we're never moving again. It's a ton of work, and I'm very happy here at Davis. My last thing I'll mention to you is something that Don actually brought up. Was he majored in biology, and he's like, how do you ever decide what you're going to major in? And now I've had two daughters that have gone through that, and they didn't really know what they wanted to study. And one thing that I've been thinking about here, and some people on the panel are aware, is we'll be launching a Master's of Engineering, a one-year master's program in medical device development. And partly that is for people that are not studying biomedical engineering as an undergraduate, but want to pivot into a new field. Many people choose a major and then later on they decide they want to do something different. And it also should be an opportunity for those that, I heard the term jack of all trades, master of none. Bioengineering has that reputation. I'm not sure how well deserved it is, but this also one-year program allows you to really kind of focus your skills and maybe accelerate your career development. And I'd be happy to kind of talk about that. And so I'll sort of end there.
Thank you, Dr. George. That was a perfect closure of our introductions. And before we pivot back to Dr. Lee, who's going to share the survey results, I just want to remind students that I'm sure you've got a long list of questions for our panelists. So make sure you get those down. We'll have a Q&A shortly. But before we do that, we thought we'd tee up the kind of mood for questions on the panel by having Dr. Song Lee from UCLA present some survey results from a recent survey of industry in bioengineering. So Dr. Lee, without any further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Walt. This is really an amazing panel. I'd like to present the survey in the next few slides and hope to get your comments for the first round of discussion. So this survey was done by the Council of Chairs of Biomedical Engineering and was for the preparation of the Education Summit a few years ago, about 4 years ago, at the Case Western. So you can see here that the survey was sent to over 200 employees. We got about 150 responses. And these employees were working in the company across the country, about 74 companies. And among them, many are from MedTech, and some biotech employees, and some in other industry, for example, consulting, software manufacturing, etc. So the first question is that when you hire engineering students, do you really distinguish them from other engineering students from different disciplines? So from this bar graph, you can see that across all of these different industry, and basically half-half. So in about 50% of the cases, people will distinguish engineering students from other disciplines. And for some hires, engineering students will be in the same pool as other engineering disciplines. So what are the differences between biomedical engineering students and the other majors and other engineering majors? So here, based on the feedback and the comments, there are some advantage for bioengineering students. And bioengineering students usually have multidisciplinary background. They have a good understanding of medical technology, applications, philology, and biology, and they can work more effectively at the interface of engineering, medicine, and biology, and can play an integral role for the project. So there's potential to be a group leader. And some other issues, and people realize that the engineering students somehow in certain engineering specific area is relatively weaker. There are some design capability issue in manufacturing training that could be improved. And the survey includes 23 questions. We asked the respondents to give a score from 1 to 10, 10 as the most important factor, and 1 is the least. And here it shows the heat map in the average score from the survey. The red color is the highest and most important. And the green is less important. And you can see actually even the least important has a score it's around 5. The highest will be 8 or 9. And we can see what these questions are in the next slide. So here we color-coded these questions. The questions in the red color are the most important. And you can see here, number 5, the industry exposure is one of the most important factors affect the decision whether to hire an engineering student. So you need to have either co-op or summer internship experience that prepare the candidate in many different ways. For example, presentation skills, teamwork, independent work, communication skills, and actually all of these soft skills that are considered very important are listed in question 18 to 23. And all of these are not necessarily related to specific engineering background knowledge, rather it's the capability, troubleshooting, and soft skills. These are very important. In some areas, for example, the course in engineering is considered important for some consulting or software coding capability, but for some more biotech related area, the life science background in some physiology, molecular biology background are also important. In the rest of them, other questions related to mostly knowledge in certain area, and they are important, but just the general background will be sufficient for the preparation. I think this, okay, so just give you an idea of who hire our students. And I use this data from UCLA. These are the companies that hire our students before the pandemic during the 2 years, 2019 to 2020. You can see the companies in all of these areas, biotech, medtech, even general areas of engineering companies, software companies, consulting, etc. Very broad. I think there will be a good discussion on that. So I'd like to hear the comments of our panel on these results and see what they think. Thank you.
There, I did it again. Sorry about that, everyone. I was going to thank Dr. Lee for going through that survey. It's very thought-provoking. Certainly will generate some ideas. Before we open the webinar for discussion, I want to remind everybody who's viewing that you should please type any questions you might have into the chat box. And because we're in a webinar format, what we thought we would do that's a little bit unique is invite about a dozen or so super talented, strong, diverse, the usual University of California student pool, right? Up on the stage with us virtually now. And so Dr. Lee, I think, is bringing some student panelists up here to join us. So we'll just give him a second to get that underway. It'll take a little bit of time. We're hoping that some of our colleagues from the undergraduate and master's student ranks can kind of, bring up some topics that may be on your mind when you think about going out into the world and your next move. So that's our intent here today. And maybe what I should do first is select a student to share a first question. So Melinda, are you able to hear me okay? Melinda Kwan?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Melinda, maybe if you start, you pick your favorite panelist, and maybe we'll have a couple of panelists actually answer this question.
Okay. This is definitely a question that I wanted to ask. So what does the ideal applicant look like for each of the 3 respective biomedical industries that hire bioengineers? If Linda, you would like to go.
Sure. So it's going to be really different depending on the exact job, right? And it might be that biotech, I think we might, or biotech pharma, we might actually hire students with a broader range of technical skills than a lot of the other ones, because we're looking for people who can do cell engineering, to make the cells that make the the product. We're looking for process engineering, device engineering. And then also an area that people don't think about is actually animal model systems, both for the biology, and we want to get away from having to do in vivo testing as much as possible. So using modeling to move to in vitro and into in silico. So you can imagine the exact technical skills, they vary based on that. But the soft skills that were mentioned are really super important. And I knew you guys might be interested in this, and I knew what I did. So I reached out to some of my colleagues that are still in different companies and these different areas. And they said, you expect the people to have a basic technical knowledge. You want them to know what they did and what they know but didn't do themselves. So you can expect people to maybe ask you questions to probe that. A bigger thing though is problem solving. You know, can you solve a problem you haven't seen before? And really teamwork and communication. And the teamwork thing, you know, means can you work with people that are your peers, but also people that are, say, above you in seniority and below. So like at Amgen, interviewing before the pandemic used to be a full day thing. And we would have the research associates take people out to lunch. And often you would learn more about people by how they treated the folks they thought had nothing to do with their hiring than you would learn by how they interviewed with the senior folks. So I think those kind of soft skills and teamwork, you can't overemphasize teamwork.
Thanks, Linda. Melinda, did you want to direct the question? You said a few different flavors of bioengineering industry. You got another one you want to ask the same question to? Maybe Don? Don, would you take that question for the medtech world?
Yeah, so really it would depend on the role that you're interviewing for. You know, if you're interviewing for an R&D position, the ideal candidate's going to have a different profile than, say, what I was looking for in manufacturing operations. I was looking for someone who could solve a critical, you know, a technical problem, and I was more interested in their problem solving skills and their critical thinking skills. And then just as you saw in the survey and what you just heard from Linda, honestly, the most successful engineers I ever hired were the ones that really excelled in those topics 18 through 23. The soft skills, getting along with people, working well with people, problem solving with people. These technical problems you encounter in medical device likely aren't going to be solved by you alone. It's going to require working with a number of different disciplines, and you have to be able to demonstrate skills that you could work not only with other people in your same field, but across different functional areas.
We are getting a lot of great questions on the chat, so I really appreciate everybody stepping up. I'll keep letting those collect a little bit and maybe ask another one of our student panelists if they've got a question they'd like to ask. Thank you, Melinda. Akansha?
Yeah, this is looking at the survey, one of the areas that needs to be addressed more is design capability. So I guess this question is for Greg. So what kind of design experience skill set is valuable in the industry, and how can a candidate highlight that during the application process and the interview process?
Great question. So chances are, maybe unless you're joining a startup, if you're joining a larger company, you're not, when you're a bioengineer, you're not going to be in charge wholly for the design. So once again, it goes back to the soft skills, your ability to critically think, and also your technical writing. I think what ends up happening is as a bioengineer, you're going to have to write requirements, right? Technical requirements. And so we're engineers and scientists. We don't like writing typically, right? Not a lot. Do you really need to, like writing? You need to start getting good at it, because it's your ability to communicate that to other vendors. So for example, we may contract out the design of a piece of hardware to another company to manufacture it. If your documentation and writing isn't well communicated, you could get back something totally different. So I would highlight that. You think oh, I'm good at design, I'm good at inventing. It's not about inventing. It's really about being meticulous, communicating well, working well with others. Once again, this all points back to the soft skills.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.
You're welcome.
Outstanding. Maybe we'll go back to Don. Actually, Bruce Wheeler asks our first question from the audience there about really just getting the first job. I really like that one. And he talks a lot about how your background, Don, is pretty different from most of the people here. Talk a little bit about getting that first job and what advice you offer to new biomedical engineering graduates.
Yeah, I get this question a lot from my undergraduate students. I see just a lot of stress and tension that they have about, they feel pressure that they should know what they want to do their entire career. And I try to allay their concerns and just say, you don't even know what jobs exist out there yet. There's no possible way you could know what you want to do for the next 40 years. And with my own journey, after my first job, the other jobs I had, I did not even know existed until after I got my first job. So you get your first job, and then this whole world opens up to you, and you see how work gets done in an organization and the different roles people play. So I tell them, focus on just getting your first job. Don't worry about making that decision about what you want to do the rest of your career. And it really don't let your degree define you or limit you. Your degree may say biomedical engineering, but you may want to do something totally different. Your degree may say mechanical engineering, and you may just get so excited about biomedical engineering. So be careful that you don't let your degree define you.
Fantastic. I was just typing quickly with one of our student panelists, Parneet Kaur. If you unmute yourself, you were saying you really liked this question. So why don't you take it from there, Parneet?
Yes. So just a quick question that I just have like from the panelists is like, are there like, what are some of the valued skills like that can be used like in the industry, any industry, like main valued skills? So it could be for any of the panelists. Actually. Yeah. Well, so like in any industry, some top 3 valuable skills that like if I'm applying for any job that I can go with and be like, okay, these are my top skills that I carry with me.
So I would like to just offer one response here, and this something that Greg said kind of brought this back for me, and that is I frequently get the question from undergraduates, what's the most important class I ever took when I was an undergraduate? And that provided the most value in my career. And the answer would be writing. I would say the one thing Davis did very well is taught me to write. And I can't tell you how valuable that was throughout, no matter what industry I worked in, no matter what job I was in. If you could communicate well via your writing, you're gonna have a real step up.
I'm happy to do a variation on that too. Can I say +1? I +1 Dawn, and also I'd say also speaking too at some point, right? Which is there's definitely the public speaking aspect which can come in handy on a panel.
Absolutely.
But also just being able to listen for what matters to your colleague, to your teammate. It's actually back to what quite a few people said here, and I would even say, and I really loved what Linda said as well. I don't know if it's the top 3, but maybe just trying to answer your questions. Definitely, the entry point is whichever technical skills they are looking for, right? I mean, that's sort of a given, and certainly that's an important part. But I really would say it's almost surprising that in such deeply technical fields, that back to the soft skills, the leadership skills, the self-leadership skills, probably most key, which is back to being a great team member, and also being an excellent communicator. I might add to that is also being self-aware. That's not an easy one necessarily to cultivate, but I've definitely seen those who have probably made the most impact really care deeply about how people experience them as a teammate, but also as a leader. I had one professor who had shared with us that it takes two to know one, which means it takes two people to know one person, that's yourself, which is that you'll always need data and feedback from others. And it's really worth asking for that. And you know what, you'll find a lot of friends and colleagues who care deeply about your contribution, and they will readily share with you what's working great, but also, if you ask them, what could be better. And, that's a shared goal, right? If you're on a team together, you all want to, reach for high performance and, really make a difference. And that's why you all showed up together.
So actually the ability to take constructive criticism and not take it personally, but as a valuable feedback and act on it, I think is another skill that nobody's really taught. It depends on, a lot of times for those of us who went to graduate school, it depends on whether our professor did that or not. But, in industry, a normal thing is once a year you have your review. And the most helpful reviews are when you're actually given advice on things that will help you improve. If they just say, oh, you did great, that doesn't help at all. So being able to take that. These are all hard to highlight in a resume though, right? So if you did any kind of teamwork, and you can highlight your role on the team and what you think you brought to the team, but what you learned from other people on the team as well, during interviews or whatever, I think that's an opportunity to kind of highlight some of these skills.
Yeah, I was going to say also your role may evolve. When I joined a small company, I love science. All I wanted to do was be a bench scientist, an extended postdoc. And then very quickly, people realized that because I'd done a lot of teaching in the past, I was good at communicating with people. And so they wheeled me out on the road. And then very quickly, I become an extended part of the sales team using technical applications. And actually, I love doing that. I kept trying to get back in the lab. And eventually someone said, okay, if you want to go in the lab, go head up R&D, biology. And I got bored stupid. I really did. I sat there and I kept pestering all my RAs and saying, have you got any more data yet that I can look at? And in the end, I just drove them all nuts. And they said, why don't you just go back on the road and, evangelize our technology and let us actually do the R&D here. So that's one of the nice things about having these adjunct professorships is that once or twice a week, I get to talk to the team. I see their data. I help to have my input. And then I leave them the hell alone,
Kevin, you stumbled into a great question that Bruce Wheeler wrote out, and I'm not going to do it justice because he wrote quite a bit here. Thanks for all the great comments, Bruce, professor at UC San Diego, if everyone doesn't know Dr. Wheeler. He talks a little bit about how brand new BME graduates tend to do a lot of different roles as they come out of undergraduate, right? They can be reliability engineers, quality engineers, new product engineers, a lot of titles that they probably never even heard of, right? And can you speak to that a little bit as somebody who's worked for the 5-person company and the 18,000 person company?
Yeah, I have to admit that when I was in a small company, I found it much more rewarding than being in a large company. And I probably shouldn't say that because I work in a large company. But what it comes down to in large companies is often, quarter by quarter, you have investors, you have shareholders, and you have to make sure that you're always on your top game. And so it's very difficult because the first thing that suffers is R&D. If times get hard, they basically pull back on R&D, and it's very, very difficult. So I think in a smaller company, anywhere from, 10 people up to even a couple of hundred people, you can be much more nimble. You can move between jobs. If you're willing to be a jack of all trades, then I think, it is rewarding. You learn an awful lot within that sector. I think if you just want to, when you're doing your courses, you think, okay, I'm a molecular biologist, I'm a bioengineer, I'm whatever. And very quickly you find out that, to be totally honest, when you've got families as well, if you've got kids and you've got a spouse and she wants to go, do a course at university, and so you're the sole breadwinner, you have to unfortunately think also about what, your salary is going to be. If you're going to be a hardcore R&D scientist, it's very likely that you won't get paid as well if you're associated with the sales revenue stream. And so it's nice when you can wear different hats, as they say, and be nimble and move between them. Within my company, PerkinElmer, most of the senior vice presidents have PhDs, but they have no publications. They very quickly decided early on in their career, that's not what they wanted to do. They got qualified because they know they needed the title to get where they wanted to go. Whereas I was happy sort of like to be in the middle somewhere because I'm passionate about the science. And I think it's important because one thing to that, without going on too long, is the fact that I get out of bed every morning and I love my life. I love my job. And I'm really excited about what I did. If I was just associated with revenue stream selling, being a business leader, I would rather shoot myself, quite honestly. So, everybody's different.
So I think this must depend on the type of company as well, though, because I would say like for a lot of the companies that started as biotech, if you look pretty far up, like say at Amgen, the senior VP for R&D was actually a practicing oncologist at UCLA for a long time. And David Reese is very well known in the field. But also, if you stay, you're expected to publish, and even in, like I said, I was in process development for much of my thing, but I think I've got more than 130 articles. I love writing, so I publish a lot. And you're not going to stay in one thing. You're going to have the opportunity to move around, as people mentioned, right? I did want to go back to that comment about, what are you going to be doing in 10 years? Many of you students, what you're going to be doing in 10 years is something that doesn't exist right now, as cell and gene therapy and other things are developed. The job I ended up with at Amgen for my last 10 years or so, being like coordinating interactions with externals, that job didn't exist. It was created because they needed it. So I would say be really open. And when you start up, it's very common for people to move around, to move within the company to different parts of the company. And so I think one thing I like about industry versus academia is that there is that ability, I think, to kind of sample the waters and find out where you belong. But I would say you need, when you're applying to a company, it might be helpful to kind of, do some research and find out if you're someone who's passionate about R&D and external connections and publishing, then some companies have a better record of that than others, and that might help inform where you go to.
There definitely are a diversity of companies, and certainly where I came from, prior to my current role at Genentech, most of our very senior people still did research and published, and most of them actually came as, from academia as well. So I think it kind of depends on which company. So, that's definitely worth looking at carefully.
One point I'd bring up is, one of the top, 5 or 6 points they made in that survey was to get industry exposure and maybe perhaps the co-op or summer internship. And Anne gave an example of going to JPL and Don, I don't know, PG&E, but before that you had some pretty non-bioengineering type experiences. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? That, that sort of you come from a totally different technology, but it really does maybe even do a better job at teaching you skills that you'll need eventually to hone a job in bioengineering. Sometimes it's really good to see what those other engineering industries are like, huh?
Yeah, you definitely will pick up transferable skills as you go through your career, and you'll find they're very valuable that you can apply in any industry and any situation. The other advice I would have for our students is that at this point in your career, you have maybe a very small network of colleagues, students that you know. But as you go through your career, it's really important to build that network, because your future job will likely come up on your radar screen from one of your network contacts. And so build your network throughout your entire career, because that network will be very valuable for your own career.
Thanks, Don. We'd better let some of these outstanding students ask a couple questions. Bryce, if you unmute yourself, looks like you're outside. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, I can hear you.
Excellent. All right, please take it away.
Awesome. So this might be a good question for Anne. I'm curious about, I'm graduating with a master's, and I'm kind of looking at two different career paths. One would be R&D, and the other would be sort of a project manager type role that's more kind of interfacing with R&D, but is not conducting any R&D. And I know that I want to stay involved in R&D, but I'm also really interested in trying out this other related field. And I'm really nervous that if I move into like a quote unquote softer job role, that when I'm being considered in the future for an R&D role, the people over there will look at it and say, well, you know, you don't have this experience that's really deep because you just came out of school and then immediately went into, you know, like project kind of management stuff instead of R&D. So I'm hesitant to try that out, but I also feel like it might be a really strong choice. So I'd love for you to I'm really curious about whether you think that that would be a bad career move if I did want to end up in R&D later.
And when you say R&D later, you mean, you know, practicing science or engineering, right? Actually being in a technical track.
Yeah, I can be more specific to my use case, which is that I'm really interested in microfluidics engineering.
Awesome.
And I very much want to do microfluidics engineering, but I also am interested in looking at some project management roles that are more in line with my very specific niche master's program, which is very much about interfacing between programs and linking the business to the engineering.
Yeah.
But I worry that if I go that route, then my skills will be seen as softer in the future. But other people I've talked to have been like, hey, you'll have like a superpower. You'll know how to interface with everybody and you'll be really attractive to R&D people. So yeah, I would love to hear your insights on that.
Yeah, there's probably not one only right answer. But I can see why you are kind of at this crossroads a bit. I have seen people who, I was the one actually, I think I said on the panel that, doors never fully close behind you. That said, showing scientific or engineering depth and mastery is extremely important. And sometimes if you do choose certain paths, sometimes it is hard to come back to it. So I do think that if you have, this is my best guess, right? I do think that if you, follow where your curiosity is, it's actually a fairly good guide. And if you really are still quite interested in keeping that door open for the technical track, you might want to at least figure out, even if you do take a project man, I don't think you've taken project management won't completely close the door for you, but you might want to find one where you can also stay pretty close to the science or the engineering, depending on your background, right? Microfluidics, I heard, whether it's not more like 50-50 time, or you're really still have a technical track, but you have elements of project management. So, again, a number of having run a department of project management, have a lot of PhDs, MDs in it, they're not far away from the science, especially the type of companies that we're in, but it is different. It is different. It is not a pure technical track, right? So again, I wouldn't say it's, sort of now or never, but try to build elements into the project management role if you go that route, so you can still, detour back, if that makes sense. The key again is mastery, right? Where are you going to choose your area of mastery?
Go get your project management certification. See if you like it. It's a certificate you can do, your PMP. It can be pricey, right? I mean, if you work at a company, they may pay for it if that's something you're interested in doing. We have project and program managers move back and forth between R&D. It's possible. I mean, at a big company, it is. Startups, maybe not, but they spend a lot of time on Microsoft projects. They spend a lot of time hounding people on deadlines, right? They're kind of in charge of meeting the deliverables on time. So inputs, outputs for different work streams. They're in charge of delivering the critical path for a project. So just dip your toes in that. See if you kind of like that, and if you don't, then go back to doing microfluidics.
It is a valuable skill no matter what.
It is a valuable skill.
You'll be the most organized, accelerated microfluidics person.
You will. And the program managers will love you, because then when you say like, oh, I know what the critical path is, I'll make sure I have this on time. They're gonna be like, oh my God, Bryce is the best.
Gantt charts on the wall. Hey, Bryce, you want to got another one you want to fire off? You were telling me you had a list of great questions. We can stay with you if you've got another one.
Sure. I am curious about this is also about kind of transitioning career paths, because I like to do a little bit of everything and I often get interested in new things. But I'm curious about how you would go about proving your value to a company that is focused on a technical skill that you do not have formal education for. Let's say you're applying for a role as a protein engineer and you worked as this is actually a direct use case for me, role as a protein engineer, and you've had some experience maybe as a microfluidics engineer. There's nothing from a technical perspective, there's nothing directly in common, but there's a lot of transferable skills. And I'm curious about how you would best go about interacting with that space when maybe the job description lists, 2+, 5+ years of experience with like a very specific thing you don't have on your resume. Is it even worth pursuing that sort of role, or would you recommend starting much more, entry level if possible? And sort of how would you recommend actually switching that? But like first job question, if we could apply that to like a first job of a new career 20 years down the line question, how would one best go about that?
Can I take that?
Yes.
Yeah. So give you an example. When I first joined Xenogen, one of the guys who applied for a job out of Berkeley was one of my technicians. He's now my boss. He left the company 3 times and kept coming back. He's a very, very talented guy. He was heading up one of the sales sections at one point, technical application sections at one point. He came in with a basic biology degree, didn't go any further. But what he showed is, again, he could be very nimble. And as Xenogen was acquired by Caliper, was acquired by PerkinElmer, he was always at the forefront. He would always be the yes guy, the go-to guy. So it doesn't matter about your skill set. If you can show that you have a particular skill set, you've proven that, you've got an R&D record to some extent, if you then move out and you show that you can manage people with other skill sets, that's the most important thing. You can't be an expert at everything. It's best to be able to choose a team, and then it's like building a puzzle. All those different skill sets come together, and if you're the guy that can orchestrate that and oversee it, you're incredibly valuable to the company. And so you have to think outside the box, quite honestly, if you want to, expand your career and elevate yourself.
There was
go ahead, Scott.
No, well, you could take it.
I was going to say, I saw a lot of nodding heads from the students. So this is a common issue, right? I'm kind of qualified for this job. I'm going to go ahead and apply, but what do I say in the interview? Scott, were you going to add to the discussion?
Well, more on the academic side, Audrey, one of the attendees, asked if there was specific coursework in their undergraduate training that absolutely would be sort of essential that you guys in industry think should be taken, and maybe even excelled at.
Yeah.
I don't know. I certainly, because I've come from a mechanical engineering background, I think taking series of courses, whether it's in, continuum biomechanics all the way to tissue mechanics, or, if you're on the chemical engineering side, a series of courses that get you to the point that you could actually, develop new types of chemistries. That's kind of, I think, important, as opposed to doing a little bit of everything. I don't know, and everybody could sort of chime in.
Linda, go ahead.
Well, I was kind of thinking the same thing, right? Because there's so many different possibilities. You can't be an expert in everything, but as you advance your career in industry too, there's an expression called I people and T people, and an I person has a deep expertise in just one thing. So honestly, Nobel Prize winners are very often I people, right? If they stuck with that. In industry, the people who tend to thrive are more T people, which means we have an expertise in one area, and usually we build off that, but we have a breadth of knowledge. And a lot of times, like for me, the thing I love is getting disparate pieces of information and pulling them together and seeing how they all go together to solve a puzzle. So I don't think there's one particular set of coursework, but I would say just demonstrating that you have a mastery in your major, but you also have a maybe wider breadth of knowledge of other scientific areas because you've explored them. And even beyond that, right? I mean, I love folks who also have a minor in philosophy or something totally unrelated to science too, because that shows they're able to think outside of the box and are creative also.
You know, I was going to say we haven't heard from Jennifer yet, who sees a lot of students come through, right, and take a curriculum at UC Davis. It's real challenging. Have you done any voice of customer with industry to hear a little bit about these most important courses or these questions about how to interview for these first jobs?
Yeah, I would say that, oops. Oh, there we go. Yeah, no, I would say it's very much so in line with what we're hearing today. When we talk with our external advisory board that Don's a part of, when we conducted our alumni survey, where I think it's over 60% of our alumni are currently in industry as biomedical engineers. I think time and time again, we keep hearing the importance of the soft skills and being able to communicate what you have done in the courses that you have taken. We constantly hear that, the hands-on courses, I would like to hear what the panelists think. The hands-on courses where we're actually building, manufacturing, executing a design project really show a lot of value in what they're able to do. So yeah, I think it's very consistent with what we're hearing.
And honestly, that's a way around. Not everybody can get an internship or a co-op, right? And that's partly on us on industry. We want people to have the experience, but we don't have enough positions to offer them. We need to work on that. But if you've done the capstone projects or design projects, or you've been in a class where, one of the classes I teach, the output is we have a team of students and they have to develop a therapeutic for a particular disease. I would highlight that on the resume that you do have these types of experiences where you've been forced to work together and design something, regardless of what your background is, as a way of kind of subbing and maybe even being more valuable than some of the internships.
We got a great question about referrals and getting that first job. I really appreciate, I think it's Raid. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your first name. They asked, can you elaborate more on the importance of getting referrals for specific roles versus simply applying with a resume and a cover letter? Is there a big differentiation in terms of increasing your chances of getting an interview and standing out compared to other candidates? Great question. I don't know who to pick on here, but Greg, you're nodding. You want to take this one?
Well, yeah, I just wrote it in the chat. It's hard to get your resume in front of hiring managers. At big companies, it goes through a recruiter and then another recruiter and then HR before it finally lands in front of me. So they'll get from hundreds of applications to get filtered down to 5 that I look at. So you have to find a way to try to shortcut that. And sometimes the way you can do that is by, reaching out to the person on LinkedIn and contacting them, right? I mean, you're building your network now is the most important thing. And then once you're in industry, you continue to build your network. It never stops, right? Because you may want to move around to other jobs and you're going to want to keep that network strong. The kind of the way you do it is if you've read those articles about, oh yeah, this is the way to get your resume to stand out by having those buzzwords. For a while, you do have to do that. You kind of have to look at what the job's offering, look at the key things that the skills are looking for. You put those on there. But then when you do the interview too, then that's your opportunity to show your soft skills, right? There was a couple of questions about how do you show your soft skills in the resume? It's hard. One of the things that I look for is someone who, if I'm looking for someone who's meticulous and careful, don't have mistakes on your resume, right? If I see something that's oh, this is just wrong, it's already kind of bad. I actually use for all my resumes, I use this software called Zety, Z-E-T-Y. I pay $20 and it auto formats your resume because I hate formatting and it does all the spell checking and everything for you. We have the technology, why make it harder on yourself? It makes it look really nice. And aesthetics matter in these kinds of things. When I look at a professional looking resume compared to something that was slapped together quickly, I'm gonna notice it. It's gonna stand out.
Any other comments on that one? Yeah,
so I would just say, make sure that you do look at what the job description is and tailor the cover letter to that. Don't just send a generic resume to everybody. And if you have buzzwords in there, but you don't actually have experience with them, that's also the worst thing, right? If you just a list of these are all the techniques we learned in my lab class, that's not going to be as helpful as these are the things I've done. I personally, and a lot of folks I know also like it when you have like, this is kind of my career goal, and this is how this job matches up something that I'm passionate about, even if my skill set isn't a perfect match. That's also helpful, because I can teach you technique, right? I can't teach you teamwork. I can't teach you passion.
Another thing I would avoid too when you're applying for a job at a company, don't apply to multiple positions at the same company. We will see that and we're like, this person's not serious. They're not serious about this role or passionate about this. It's just like, I need a job, give me something. Like, you want to tailor your cover letter and your resume to like, you're passionate about something. You want to learn this, you want to show that, right? And one way you can show that is just applying for that specific job.
The other thing you can do is if you go to conferences, you know, if you go to trade shows where you've got hundreds of booths at trade shows like AACR or ASM or one of the other big meetings, you know, you've got to be vocal. You've got to go up to people, start talking to them, networking, and not be scared to actually ask questions and perhaps make yourself look a bit silly in some cases, because that will get them to give you a card and say, hey, when you're looking for a job, you know, give me a call. And if someone will do that, they will actually talk to you and put you forward and say, this guy really was very good, you know, when I spoke to him at this, and he may fit into this position. If you apply, you know, through one of these major sites and put your CV in it, you could be the best person for the job and never get an interview. And that's just the way it is. So I really think standing out from the crowd, talking to people and being charismatic, that's really important.
That's great advice. And again, maybe variations on that would be meeting people at the poster sessions are fantastic. They're dying to talk to someone, and it could be you. And, you know, it's a great way to find out about their work. But also I like what you said, Kevin, is that even if they're not the hiring manager, I mean, preferably yes, but if they're not, their reference, their even impressions might go a long way. And they'll certainly help you navigate through the completely unknowable background of, you know, who to talk to at the company. So that's a great advice.
Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I'm sorry, Walt. That's also a good segue to advertise the 22nd annual California UC system-wide. The first day of that on August 8th is going to be a technology industry showcase. So, and I think it's exactly that, to have booths and tables with folks that want to hire and, you know, and have one-on-one opportunities with them.
Thanks, Scott. We're running low on time, I noticed, and boy, the questions are rolling in pretty heavy here. I appreciate you, Greg, typing in some great responses. Suli asked a question a while back and then asked it again, so I'll take that one. And then maybe Akil, since we haven't had a chance to hear from you yet, sitting there at UCI, I'd love to hear from you in a second. Suli asks, from a hiring manager's perspective, what's the difference between an entry-level bachelor's graduate and master's graduate? How long does it take for any difference in perception to level off in terms of opportunities and compensation? It's a great question. Don't know who wants to take that one.
I think it's the same for if you're even going up to the PhD too, right? We have entry-level positions that are specific to those degrees. It matters initially in the amount of responsibility you have, but if you're really good, after a couple of years, it won't matter at all. And, you know, we have people who are, you know, even in the scientific area, like executive directors and leading research projects, who stopped after their BS because they were just that good. So it does buy you, it lets you have a little bit more control of what you're doing quicker. And similar, if you have your PhD, you'll have your own projects initially. But, you know, 5-10 years down the line, no one's going to care what degree you have. It's what you've been able to demonstrate that you can do. I would say, I think traditional pharma, some of the bigger companies that started as pharma are a little bit more rigid, but at least for like the biotech companies, that's very true.
Steve, jump in, please.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in because of this. I mentioned the one-year master's program that we're going to launch, and there was also an earlier question about master's degrees. When we designed the curriculum with our external advisory board, it really is exactly what Linda was saying. The idea was to give you a skill set that accelerates your career development. These are skills that you generally will get in 5 to 10 years, but we're trying to give you them earlier and faster. And Don, you were part of the EAB discussion on that early on. And I think it sort of resonates with what Linda said.
Yeah, absolutely. I think whether you're talking pharma or biotech or med tech, it comes down to the product development life cycle, and the more exposure you could get to the various elements of that and the various linkages, it's just going to accelerate your career.
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, Akil, we should, without further ado, why don't you take the floor and share your question? Sorry, it took me a while.
Oh, no, it's all good. Yeah, no, actually, my original question was addressed to Stephen, because I know I'm an undergrad at UCI, and a lot of people are, looking at Masters of Engineering, and they're looking at it as like a pretty good option. And so do you recommend students go and get a Masters of Engineering right out of undergrad, or do you prefer that they maybe spend a few years working in entry-level engineering, whatever their passion is, whatever they might be doing, and then maybe to boost their or accelerate their career, doing a Master of Engineering? What are your recommendations on that? What are you like tailored to?
Yeah, well, I think, are you thinking about in terms of what type of student we're looking for our program, or just career in the private sector? I mean, the Masters of Engineering that we're putting forward is definitely a terminal degree for those interested in the private sector. I don't know that it makes a big difference. We're generally going to be targeting fresh undergraduates that are just graduating, that want to accelerate their career. If you've already been out in the private sector for 5 or 10 years, you probably have the skill sets that our master's program is going to be giving you, right? Okay. So you'll probably accelerate your career, start with higher salary, move up faster. That's sort of the idea or the plan.
Cool. That makes sense. And then I guess if you, one last question would be, I'm sure many of you guys either have other people reaching out to you for advice or job experience or whatnot, but how would you recommend students that do want to reach out to people that are higher up in industry or academia, or what do you look for when someone just approaches you at, like we were talking about, a conference, or whether that be a message on LinkedIn, or I guess, like, what do you expect from people to demonstrate right off, just right from the first conversation?
And I know you're approached by a lot of people. Why don't you take that one?
Yeah, thank you for the referrals, Walt. And they're mutual, I know.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Let's see whether LinkedIn or in person. Well, I actually think just genuine curiosity, right? Why might you be approaching me or others around the table here? Do you have a question about career path? I mean, a lot of the questions around here about where we're working. I've already kind of shown my bias. I always, personally love to have discussions about what do we think the future might look like. I mean, I think that's actually something, for example, it's one of many questions you might ask, but it might reveal where what's of greatest interest or passion of the person you're talking to. I personally always love learning. By the way, mentorship and sponsorship is always two ways, right? It's not the experienced and the supposedly wise conveying wisdom to others. I always love, in fact, I've created many internship programs at Genentech, and our subversive goal was to reverse mentor, right? Which is that leaders get to learn from the very talented, next generation of scientists, engineers, and leaders. So I don't know if that's too general, but I think that if you're approaching one of us with genuine interest and curiosity, I predict you'll have a fantastic conversation.
Please do that. That's our message today. We're all
definitely.
And a great way to close it out, Akil, a great final question, because everybody here has taken a lot of time out of their day to speak to all of the students and participants. And we want to say thank you to our panelists very much. And I think what we'll do now is have Scott close us out. Let me see if I've got a couple of slides to share. Without any further ado, Dr. Simon, please.
So thanks everybody for participating. This is exactly what the BIC is supposed to do, and what the California Academy of Bioengineering gives us access to, panels like you. So the next one of these speaker in the series is going to be Sam Achalefu, who used to be at Stanford, I believe, and now has the inaugural chair, taken up the new Department of Bioengineering at UT Southwestern. And he's just a really thinking outside of the box molecular imager. If you change the slide for me.
Yep. Oh, sorry.
And this is the event that I was just alluding to in the chat that might be a really nice opportunity for undergrads. So spread the word. This is our 22nd annual. This is really the event that the BIC initiated. Now we've sort of expanded, but this is still an amazing, get together of UC system-wide, all 10 campuses combined as one. And this year it's in UC Santa Barbara, and they're putting together a fantastic program. And this, I think, of all the years that we've done this, is probably the closest, aligned with industry. And we really are moving in that direction. In every different way, the more undergraduates we get, the more we're now seeding into California companies and beyond. And it's what we do. It's what we should do, and we'll continue doing it. And I just want to thank all the panel for taking your valuable time. That's the gift you give, and sharing all these incredible experiences. On behalf of Walt, myself, and Song, yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, thanks.
Guys.
Always fun.
Thank you.